Thank you all for joining the Toadstool Bookshop today and welcoming Jessica Reeves, the world's most productive nurse practitioner. Just as a friendly reminder, during the presentation, please keep your mics muted, and at the end, we will open up to questions. If you don't have a mic, just type away here in the chat room and we will relay them to Jessica. Also, here, just follow the link provided to purchase your copy today at the Toadstool Bookshop. Thank you. And you're all set there.
All right. So I guess thank you everybody for coming on out, so to speak, here on Zoom and talking a little bit today about my philosophies on time management. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So The World's Most Productive Nurse Practitioner is my first book, self-published, and I had a lot of time. I got a new puppy about a year ago, just over a year ago. And I found myself with some time on my hands, and I wanted to get some things done, but I wasn't able to do the things that I had anticipated doing because the puppy needed a lot of my attention. So I was able to do little bits here and there, and I started to write. I've always, been decent with words. I've always been very verbal, but decent with words and decent with writing, had good feedback there. So I thought, well, I might have something that I can put together as an article that might be helpful for other nurse practitioners or other people working in a clinical healthcare setting. So in those little bits and pieces of time when the puppy was having her crate training, I was able to put some things together. And once I got started and really kind of got my wheels in motion, I realized I had a lot to say actually about time management. And I felt that need to be productive. And that's part of where that title of World's Most Productive Nurse Practitioner came into play. I was sharing my information about my experience that kind of kept me on track and kept me on time as a nurse practitioner. I remember talking with my mom about this, who is not a nurse practitioner. So she was a little surprised at some of the hurdles that people in a clinical setting have every day, really every day in the workplace to stay on track time-wise, and how there are some things that can be done about it. And sometimes we are just completely at the mercy of the patients that we work with, the universe, circumstance, to be able to get done for the day at a reasonable time. And to do that consistently is a real challenge for pretty much everyone I know. Some people do better with it than others, but it's a real challenge, and it's an ongoing challenge. It's not a battle that's ever won. The best you can do is really manage it. So by sharing the things that have worked for me, I thought I might be able to not only be productive, right, and be the world's most productive nurse practitioner, but to also help other nurse practitioners, other clinicians, because, physician assistants, physicians, phlebotomists, EKG techs, you name it. Anyone who works in the healthcare setting is affected by these time constraints and could potentially, I hope, benefit from the things that I have to share. So I put the book together. And like I said, I sat down, started writing, and I had a lot more to say than I realized, or than I maybe gave myself credit for, and put it together and ended up with a finished version. Decided to self-publish it because, again, I had time on my hands, not big chunks of time, but enough time on my hands where I was able to work on this project and learn about self-publishing and learn about distribution. And now learn about promotion, because that's the phase that we're in now. So it has been a really interesting journey. It has brought me into contact with a lot of clinicians, which is the piece that I sort of anticipated, but a lot of other things that I didn't anticipate, learning about myself, learning about the industry, learning about things that elements of time management that I hadn't considered, or struggles that I hadn't considered that other folks are experiencing, which has then inspired me to write more and to write other things that are sort of in that realm. So it has really been a great experience for me. The folks that I've talked with that have already read the book have been really, really enthusiastic about it, and some nice constructive feedback as well, which I always love, because we always want to be trying to improve things and improve processes and just make things better. So I'm always happy to hear that too, and have those conversations, and to work forward with some other things under that same umbrella of World's Most Productive Nurse Practitioner, working with students and doing some time management workshops, these sorts of things. So there's some really interesting things that have come from this that I never anticipated, that I'm very grateful for. And I'm very curious and excited and anxious to see what other things, come of this experience moving forward. And even having this conversation today with folks is something that I didn't anticipate. So when the folks from the Toadstool reached out to me, it was a very welcome surprise and exciting opportunity to be able to have this, even despite rising COVID numbers. We can switch it over to Zoom, which is more clearly more COVID friendly. And it was nice to be able to have that opportunity as well. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have, either who may have already read the book or who wish to read the book, and wish to apply those time management and process improvement principles to their daily life, their work life, or otherwise. So I turn it over now to Elise or to anyone else. I don't have hosting privileges, so and I'm on my phone, not my laptop. So if there are elements in the chat box, I am not able to see them.
Nobody said any questions yet, but I guess, like I say, what are some examples where you had to really like where you struggled with time manage but found a solution for?
Nope, I'm not hearing anything, so I don't know if you said something and you could repeat.
Hello?
Oh, I'm seeing now just a question that popped up on
Oh,
the screen.
I did too.
How do you handle last minute extra questions? I think it said. I assume that means in a clinical visit. It depends is the answer. That's always the answer. It depends how much time we have left in a visit, but it also depends on what the question is and who the patient is. So is this somebody who is here because they've got some big surprise, not incident, but diagnosis that happened. They've hurt their back. They were moving wood this weekend to get ready for winter. They've hurt their back and they're really here for that. And that's the thing that's the most pressing issue right now. They also need to have a follow-up on their cholesterol. That doesn't necessarily need to be a today thing. Do we need to really dig into the matter at hand? And is that going to take all the time that we really are allowed for that day or for that visit? Or are they here for just a routine follow-up of something else? And we've got plenty of time to dig into these other questions. Oh, I always had wondered about this, or I checked my blood pressure on my friend's blood pressure monitor and it was high. What do I do about that? Can we recheck it now? So you have to navigate that a little bit. It's going to be a lot of it context driven and context dependent. So the visit, the type of visit, the type of patient, the circumstance, and also the context of whatever else might be going on. So is this a day where you've got a lot of folks who are coming in with a lot of very acute and severe needs? This is, of course, in a sort of like a primary care setting, not an emergency room setting that I'm referring to. But if you have a lot of folks that are coming in who are in a kind of more of a delicate condition and are needing a lot of care, that might dominate your day and that might dominate your personal bandwidth. So you have to really navigate. And so much of that is dependent. But I'm also frank with patients. If the time comes that we're running out of time, we've allotted a certain amount of time for visit and we are just getting close to the end. Sometimes that's what you need to share with patients to say, we're just about out of time for today, but we can definitely schedule a follow-up. We can do a telehealth visit like this, the video visit. We can have you come back in again tomorrow, the next day, whatever the case may be. So there are options. You have to know what your options are, and then you have to apply them judiciously to the matter at hand, to the circumstance. And so I'm seeing a question about balancing taking a break with getting things done efficiently. I used to have a little joke that wasn't a joke. And when people would ask, how do you run on time? I would say, I start on time and I end on time. So starting your visits on time, ending your visits on time as much as possible and within reason is one of the ways to do that. If you're doing that, if you're staying generally on track most of the time, then when that time comes for a scheduled break, it's like another appointment. You're anticipating it, you're ready for it. And when that time comes, you need to draw the line in the sand and devote your energy to the break just the same way you would devote your energy to the visit if that's what you were doing that was on the schedule. So striking that balance is, again, being in the moment, paying attention to the context of what's going on, but then also having your priorities and recharging, having that break is important. And it's going to get you, if the break is a lunch break, so it's the middle of the day, that's going to sustain you so that you're able to devote the energy that you need to devote to the patients that you have waiting for you in the afternoon, because they deserve the best version of you that you can offer. And if you're wearing yourself down, it's hard to offer your best version of you to the patients.
Can you give us some examples of like what methods you use throughout the day? Like maybe a day that's like super busy or like bogged down with patients?
Sure, sure. So sometimes you have to, again, I think that knowing is one of the biggest things. So you have to know about yourself. You have to know how long things take you to do. What is kind of a quick task for me might not be a quick task for somebody else. And if you are feeling that bogged down and you're really feeling like everything is just taking longer than expected, this sort of thing, sometimes you need to, for lack of a better term, cut your losses. Are there things that absolutely need to get done today for patient safety, for professional responsibility, all those things? If those are the things that need to get done today, those have to have the top priority. With the time left over, then you look at the things that have a little bit longer of a shelf life. It would be great to get XYZ done today if the other priority things are satisfied and if there is time left over and patients haven't had a lot of curveballs. We're not running late, or you get a no-show. So you have a little chunk of time in your schedule where you're able to kind of pick some of these other things up and just clear them off your plate. Then you have your things that have a longer shelf life, have a little bit more time on them. So responding to messages, that sort of stuff. In most cases, that's not something that you're going to do 5 minutes after that message arrives in your inbox, but you have a little more time. You might have a couple days, rest of the week, that sort of thing. Looking at the amount of time you have, so knowing what your resources that's available, knowing how long the things are that you need to do to sort of plug them into that. It's like a puzzle, really. I actually thought of it like, I'm not a video game person, but sometimes when I would have a really busy, really fast days, it felt like an old like 80s video game where you're like trying to like shoot I think it's asteroids is one of them. You're trying to shoot all the little things down and like clear the screen, and then they start going faster and faster and faster. That would also happen sometimes too, but you have to kind of know where to place your target, where to place your emphasis, and try not to be too hung up on the things you didn't get to. They will be waiting for you as long as you're doing the most important, like the safest safety related things first. And then you have to have your triage and have it fall from there. That's sort of the approach. And then there are times that isn't going to work. Everything goes out the window and you have to just sort of cope, get through the visit, get through the morning, get through the day. And you may have no chart notes closed at that point. You may leave at the end of the day quite tired, but done. And the things that needed to get done today, you saw the patients, you put in the orders that needed to be put in. Those things are crossed off the list. The other things will still be there. You can come back fresh tomorrow. I saw some other questions come in, but I'm not seeing them now.
I don't see any other questions in there at the moment.
I know there was one about preventing burnout, or is it inevitable? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I don't think it's not inevitable, but I do think that burnout is it's a strong risk. It makes me think of certain jobs. Nursing is actually one of these jobs. Certain jobs where there are some physical risks. So a lot of nurses hurt their backs. Nurses who work bedside, moving patients around, lifting heavy things, being in sort of awkward positions for long periods of time can really stress a back. And when you do that once, it's one thing, but when you do that over and over and over again for years on end, because this is your job, that risk goes up. So it's taught in nursing school now, and on paper it's great to have better body mechanics and making sure that, like, if you're repositioning a patient, that you're doing it in a way that isn't straining, ideally is not straining your back, because it's such a risk. I think burnout is really similar. If you don't actively work to stem the tide, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say it's going to be inevitable, but the risk is going to be up there. If you do things to actively attempt to not let that happen, so if it was moving a patient and you're actively working to not hurt your back, and you're using good body mechanics and a two-person lift if you need to, that is going to lower, not to zero, but it's going to lower your risk of hurting your back seriously. Burnout is the same. If you are looking at how you're using your time, where your maybe wastes of time are, or inefficiencies, that's a nicer way to say it. I don't like to say waste. But if you're looking at how you're using your time and how you can use it better, and how you can use the time that you have available to you and the time you're willing to commit. Some people will just keep working until midnight till it's all done. That's not sustainable. But the amount of time that you're willing to commit, is it until 5 p.m.? Is it staying half an hour late to get things done? And making sure that that time is working for you, and actively working to keep that the case, making adjustments when they need to be to the way that you're working or the way that you're doing things, and asking for help when you need to. So if you apply it again to that analogy of safe patient transfer techniques, and using your back appropriately, you are, maybe when you're moving a patient, you're standing a certain way, you're not reaching too much, you're keeping your arms close to your core, these sorts of things. And if you've got a patient or a load that is too heavy, you're asking for a second person. It's a two-person transfer, two-person assist. If you're doing the same thing with working with burnout, where you're really actively managing and looking at how you're using your time, how your time is working for you, and asking for help when you need it, whether that's from a colleague, whether that is from a workshop, whether that is from reading a book, mine or someone else's, but doing something that's going to help you to build those skills up and to work effectively. That is, I think, the best way to prevent burnout. So it's not inevitable, but if you don't actively work to address it, I think that risk is very, very high. Medicine and healthcare is a very difficult, challenging culture to work in. COVID has made everything more challenging across the board. So, of course, things are going to be more challenging, and you're going to have to work harder to prevent that burnout and to protect yourself against that. But I think it can be done. I think it can be done. I don't think it's easily, and I don't think it comes naturally, because we don't teach people to do that. A lot of people have to learn it the hard way, or they start to see some warning signs and they do something about it before it becomes too much to repair.
I was actually just thinking, what things could you talk about that showed the differences of, like, prior to COVID methods, and like methods you now have to use because of COVID? Do they affect it any differently than before?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. And I think that you could ask probably 100 providers and get probably at least 50 different types of answers to that question. But speaking to my own experience early in COVID, there was this, all of a sudden, this big emphasis on telehealth. So we were doing video visits like this. It was challenging because to assess a patient, you're not able to listen to their heart and lungs. You're not able to feel like the temperature of their skin, like, oh, they're very cold or they're very warm. So there were some things there that were challenging and different. But from a time management perspective, there were some things that were, I think, a very big improvement. Um, and I think it was an improvement for the patient as well. As soon as the patient logged into the visit and you logged into the visit, if it was a visit scheduled for 1 o'clock, here we are. It's 1 o'clock. You're not talking to somebody else who's getting your blood pressure. We are jumping right into it. We've got that full 20 minutes or whatever the length of the visit is, because you're not spending some of it with like an assistant and having to tell them the reason you're there, then you tell me again. And it's this whole thing, that redundancy that happens sometimes with the in-person visits. That was a big game changer with COVID. I think it helped to keep visits efficient and for things to run on time. I think the novelty of a video visit also helped patients, they thought about it a little differently. It also, I think, was helpful and continues to be helpful, because there's no travel time. If you are logging into a video visit, you can kind of stop what you're doing, pick up your phone, your laptop, and you're there at the visit. You don't have to find a parking space and check in and wait in a waiting room. All of that goes away. So it's more efficient for the patient. It's more convenient for the patient, and likewise for the providers as well. One thing, though, that has really exploded, that is sort of where that double-edged sword of COVID comes in, is when we say telehealth, part of that means that video visit. So having something like this, like a Zoom call, where you're just talking, using your phone with the video, is part of telehealth. But some of the other parts of telehealth, as providers, when we talk about this, we're talking about receiving messages from patients in the patient portal and through the chart and that sort of thing, the electronic health chart. And it's patients I think, have felt increasingly comfortable with that. But at the same time, their expectations, I think, may have changed. And so they're sending a message thinking it's going to be read right away and responded to pretty quickly. And that's not often the case, because patients might have one or two healthcare providers. Healthcare providers have hundreds or thousands of patients that they're responsible for. And so when these messages start coming in, and then there's more and more and more of them as patients get more comfortable with these electronic methods of communicating and interacting with the healthcare system, it kind of very sharply ramped up and turned from like a trickle into a tidal wave. So that's kind of like a before and after piece that has been a factor. I think in all healthcare settings, you've got the fact that how are we letting patients into in-person visits? How is that impacting, things like timing and efficiencies and that sort of thing? So very early on, we had very lengthy screening things before we would let anyone in any kind of building. That has relaxed a little bit, I think, as a community, as a society, but it's still present, especially in healthcare settings. But as we're kind of navigating that piece, I want to almost say, kind of go a little bit on a limb here and say that I think that a lot of folks, whether in healthcare or just in society, didn't necessarily anticipate COVID having this long of a duration of an impact on us. And that impact has changed. We're coming up on 2 years that we've been working through this, with varying levels of success in a variety of approaches. And through that 2 years, we've had to shift how we do what we do and our response to this. And that has also trickled down to healthcare, clearly, to visits that are not COVID related, but how we do this. Initially, we didn't want to see anyone in person. Now we're seeing folks in person, but there are still parameters for safety, these sorts of things. And all of that has an impact on things like patient experience, but also on the flow of a day, for all persons concerned, whether that is somebody who is working at, answering phones, whether that is somebody who is seeing patients directly, whether that's the patient, it has an impact. And it's, I think it's becoming an increasing challenge, I think, for a lot of people. Yeah. And then you've got, like I said, things like the messaging and these sorts of things. So even when you're done with your patient encounter, you're not necessarily done with the work. There are these other things that are not scheduled pieces that are work that are waiting for you. That has increased, that volume has increased a lot. And it's been a lot, I think, for most providers to keep up with.
It looks like someone's asking, how do you handle emergencies when they come up on your efficient schedule?
Well, gracefully always. I like to think that. But emergencies are just that. These are things you can't really plan for. There's no way of knowing that someone is going to come in and they think, oh, it's, my stomach doesn't feel right. And then you get them into the exam room and you realize, oh, I think this is something a little more serious. This seems like this could be like, I don't know, diverticulitis. And in order to assess that, we need to get labs, we need to get imaging. This is going to be more than just like a visit. You're going to be spending about half the day because you got to get all of these other things done. And then from there, that's going to kind of dictate care. Um, so when those things come up, you have to have that flexibility to be able to say, this therefore means some of the other things I thought I would get to today um, might need to get shifted. The priorities they may drop down a couple of rungs on the ladder because other things are coming in above. Um, and knowing, again, to go back to knowing how long it takes you to do certain things, how long you spend doing a chart note, but also how long does it take you if you are doing a physical, right? A head to toe physical versus seeing somebody with a nail fungus. They've got something's going on with their toenail. That's a much faster visit versus like a procedure visit. If you're doing a joint injection, how long does that really take you? And knowing, can I borrow some of the time from that visit to deal with this emergency or to deal with how that emergency that ends up on the schedule um, kind of trickles down and affects other things. Yeah. Is it going to throw off your timing? Yeah, probably. But it doesn't mean that all hope is lost. If you know how long other things can take, then okay, I have a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. I'll have a little bit of a break in time here, or I'll be able to, like I said, borrow a couple of minutes from that visit. We might be able to, that probably isn't going to take the full visit time to get through that issue. So we'll catch up at that point. Um, so being aware, always keeping your eye on your schedule. I tend to watch these things like a hawk and watch for those changes because that's how you don't want to be taken by surprise. Emergencies are one thing, surprises are quite another. And the surprises are the ones, I think, for me, speaking just subjectively, surprises are the ones that stress me out. Emergencies, what are you going to do? You gotta respond to it. But surprises are the real thing to watch out for. So if you can kind of see those as soon as possible on the horizon, it's going to help you to cope with that, I think, a little more effectively. So being able to flex, being able to, kind of stretch here and pull back there, and then doing whatever is within your power to not be taken by surprise is key.
If anybody has any other questions they want to ask, if you could put them in the chat room, that'd be great. Or if you want to vocally ask her yourself, you can always do that. Other than that, do you have any other things that you want to add on while we're waiting, or?
Boy, that's a great question. I think that probably the biggest takeaway I would say, in the thing that folks could implement, immediately without reading the book, without really doing a ton of work, is to just have that awareness to know thyself, for lack of a better term. Once you kind of get a sense of how long it takes you to do things, then you can build on that and you can start with the smallest of things. It doesn't even have to be something work related. I mean, this is just like a general time management thing that you can do. But I think of myself washing dishes. I know that the plates are going to be faster to wash than the bowls, right? So if I'm kind of rushing and going through them, I'm going to kind of crank those plates out fast, and then I'm going to take a little more time with the bowls. Or if I've got something that is not particularly dirty and it just is a clean wash, and then these other things I'm going to want to be able to devote a little more time to them, knowing that somebody else might approach it differently, but knowing how long it takes me to do this, how long it takes me to do that, and then applying that back to the resource that you have, which is time. I think that's the important thing. And there are a lot of different ways to gain awareness. Of course, in the book, there are some tips and tricks, and some worksheets and some guidance on PDSA cycles and things like this, that will help with that. But whatever you can do to get to know how long things take you to do, that's an important first step, and that is going to serve you in a lot of ways, whether it's in a clinical setting or elsewhere, or even just washing dishes. Like I said, it's something you can apply to a lot of different things. And I think if time management is your thing, or you want it to be your thing, that will help.
Okay. That was a really nice presentation and everything. I loved everything that you said. I guess there's no more questions. um, so, just as a reminder to our viewers, there's a link in the chat room that goes directly to her book. If you'd like to purchase it, we can get it on order. Things are a little bit slow at the moment for certain books, and I think that is one of them. So it might take a little longer for it to come in, but it is certainly able to be ordered. Okay.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for coming out or coming on to the Zoom call, and stay on time, start on time, end on time.
And we will have this recorded and everything and put up onto our website. So if anybody wants to go back and visit it, or if you need to use it for other things, it's certainly there for your use.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody for coming out.
Yeah.